What does defeat sound like? Is it the thunder of falling bombs, the crack of a rifle, or is it the silence that comes after, the quiet, creeping dread that seeps into your bones in a jungle that watches you, in a war where the very ground beneath your feet could betray you? For the United States, the war in Vietnam wasn't just lost on the battlefield in 1975. It was lost, soldier by soldier, in the minds of young Americans between 1965 and 1973. This is not a story of geopolitics or body counts. This is the story of an army that brought overwhelming firepower and met an enemy more powerful than any weapon, terror itself. The confidence and the coma. They arrived as giants, the most technologically advanced military force in human history. They had aircraft that could level mountains, helicopters that were like chariots of the gods, and artillery that could turn night into day. Their mission seemed clear: find the enemy and crush him. This was the war they were trained for. This was the war they expected. But Vietnam was a coma, a green, humid, beautiful coma. The enemy, the Vietcong and the NVA, refused to play their part. They wouldn't stand and fight in great, decisive battles. Instead, they melted into the trails, into the villages, into the very earth. The first crack in the American psyche wasn't from a bullet. It was from frustration. A grinding, exhausting, soul-crushing frustration. You can't defeat what you can't see. You can't overpower an enemy who chooses not to be there when your fist swings. This was the first terror, the terror of the void. The enemy was a ghost, and ghosts are far more frightening than men. The groan over hell. And then, the ghost began to speak, not with shouts, but with whispers of violence. This was the second, and far more intimate terror. The environment itself had become a weapon. The Viet Cong mastered the art of the booby-trap, not to kill armies, but to kill minds. A simple pressure plate made from a bamboo spring and a grenade. A pit of sharpened, feces-coated stakes hidden under a thin mat of grass. A bicycle spoke bent into a snake hook. This constant, low-grade fear rewired the nervous system. A vine became a wire. A child's smile became potential deception. A quiet village became a labyrinth of potential death. There was no front line. The front line was everywhere. It was the next step, the next doorway, the next trusting face. This is what historians call the burden of the war. For the GI, it was simply the weight of suspicion, the weight of perpetual anxiety. The jungle wasn't just an environment, it was a participant, and it was on the side of the Vietcong. The Tet Offensive, the shattering of reality. By early 1968, the American soldier was strained, but the core narrative held: we are securing the country. We are winning. Then, on the Tet holiday, that narrative was not just broken, it was obliterated. Imagine the psychological impact. For years, you've been chasing phantoms in the jungle. Then, overnight, tens of thousands of those phantoms materialize in every major city, at every Allied base, even on the grounds of the U.S. Embassy, the symbolic heart of American power in Vietnam. Militarily, Tet was a disaster for the Vietcong. They were wiped out in the open. But psychologically, it was their masterpiece. It screamed one undeniable truth to every 19-year-old G. They are everywhere. They are endless. And they have a will we cannot comprehend. The trust in the command's assurance evaporated. The belief in light at the end of the tunnel vanished. If the enemy could do this, then what were they truly capable of? The war was not only unwinnable in the jungle, it was unwinnable in the mind. The internal rot. With the external reality shattered, the internal world of the soldier began to rot. This was the fourth and most devastating terror, the terror of moral collapse and isolation. Who were they fighting for? The South Vietnamese government was often corrupt. The villagers they were supposed to save might be hiding the enemy. The folks back home were either hostile or painfully, naively supportive of a war that made no sense on the ground. The rules of engagement blurred. The pressure to produce body counts led to tragedy and atrocity. The bond of unit cohesion, the one thing that holds a soldier together, began to fray under the strain of a rotating, one-year tour. Your buddy dies, and his replacement is a green kid you don't have the energy to care about because he might be dead tomorrow. And then, the ultimate psychological blow. You survived your 365 days. You got on the plane. You flew out of the chaos. And you landed in a world that either hated you or didn't want to hear about it. There was no parade. There was no shared understanding. The terror didn't end when you left Vietnam. You brought it home in your silence, your nightmares, your rage. The United States did not lose the Vietnam War in a grand, cinematic battle. It was defeated by a strategy of psychological erosion. The Vietcong, understanding they could never match American firepower, decided to attack something more vulnerable, the American will. They weaponized doubt. They weaponized the landscape. They weaponized time itself. The true victory of the Vietcong was not in capturing Saigon in 1975, but in capturing the mental landscape of the American soldier years before. The legacy of this psychological defeat is etched not just in history books, but in the lives of generations of veterans. It reshaped how modern militaries think about morale, about duration of combat, about the very real wounds you cannot see. It reminds us that in war, the most powerful terrain is not the hill or the valley, but the human mind. The soldier in our thumbnail, with that distant stare, he wasn't just looking at a jungle. He was looking into an abyss that his own fear had carved. And in that abyss, the certainty of victory had been lost long before the last helicopter left the roof of the embassy. That is the sound of defeat.